And now it's time for Mob Talk Radio with your host, Jeff Canarsie.
Cokehead, jerk-off, piece of shit Anthony Persiano, who I like to call Pinocchio Persiano. Now, if you don't like indictment and legal paperwork, you're not going to like this segment. But I want to make a couple of points. And one of the things that I did was I read over a 60-page indictment of Joe Servideo. And Anthony Persiano was the informant in that case, just like he is the informant in an ongoing case that is in Philadelphia. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of that case or the 15 defendants in that case. But I'm going to make a case today for why we shouldn't believe a goddamn word Anthony Persiano fucking says. There were things that Persiano was doing while he was employed by the FBI that were bypassed. The Newark division of the FBI dropped cases against him because at the end of the day, the words of this piece of shit were more important than the reality of what Persiano was doing behind the scenes. So we're going to have a lot of information, and I've got 19 pages to get through, but I'm probably not going to do all of them. I want to hit home on certain points, and this isn't by any stretch of the imagination some sort of lopsided idea. These are taken from facts, from the indictment. And listen, in any indictment, there are things you can argue and things you cannot. But in this indictment, to quote a lot of other people, this indictment fucking stinks and should be in the garbage. Persiano shouldn't be believed on any fucking level. So according to the FBI, Anthony Persiano began cooperating in 2015. However, there's no specific date in the paperwork to when he actually officially became a cooperator. And the reason why I think the FBI doesn't put that date in is because Persiano was still committing fraud while he was on the FBI payroll. So you have to look at the genesis for cooperation, right? So you have to understand, like in the case of J.R. Rubio, he was selling drugs and got caught and then decided to become a rat. And just like that situation, we have a similar situation here. According to the indictment paperwork, Anthony Persiano entered into a cooperation deal with the FBI after his admitted participation in a staged robbery of a pawn shop, which was designed to deceive an insurance company. Persiano admitted to participating in a staged armed robbery, and it is anticipated that he will plead guilty to fraud charges for those offenses. It should be noted that an FBI supervisor not involved with the current investigation believed that Anthony Persiano was not truthful about the staged robbery. However, after consideration of all the evidence, which included reviewing security camera footage of the robbery and consensual recordings, which I don't know how any fucking recording is consensual, it remains the position of the Newark FBI agency that Persiano is corroborated and that he participated in the staged robbery as part of a scheme to deceive an insurance company. As a part of Persiano's cooperation with the government, Persiano has agreed to consensually record conversations with the targets of the investigation with which he is involved with and will testify if called upon by the government in exchange for the government providing sentencing considerations, i.e. downward departures or similar, on the staged robbery. Persiano has an extensive criminal history, including aggravated assault, robbery, contempt of court, robbery by threats, firearms possession, and third-degree murder. And what's funny about that third-degree murder charge is that within 1 hour of being arrested for that murder, he starts to sing. Couldn't hold up under pressure, admitted to everything. And obviously he would go on to fight that he admitted to everything. But you guys ever watch the first 48? Those guys got more fucking tact and balls than this prick did. He gets in the hot box and starts shaking immediately. So, Anthony, maybe you should watch the first 48 and learn how to take fucking lessons, prick. So what's important about that first part is the fact of out of the fucking gate, an FBI supervisor who's overseeing everybody that works underneath of him says, I don't believe a fucking word he has to say. If you don't believe anything that he has to say at the outset, then why the fuck do you believe anything that comes after the fact? So the Pennsylvania State Police investigated a business that he owned called Code Red Fire Water Restoration, LLC, which was operated by Persiano for fraud. Subsequently, Newark FBI initiated an investigation regarding similar allegations, because there was a whole bunch of them that he did this to a bunch of people too. The PSP closed their investigation and provided their investigative file to the FBI, who did nothing fucking with it. They buried it. Persiano is cooperating with the FBI investigation as well, which is continuing. And depending on the outcome of that investigation, Persiano may plead guilty to additional charges related to the alleged business fraud in the event that those allegations can be proven. So they may file charges, and they didn't, because what Persiano had to say was more important. But let's look at something else. The reliability of information. During the course of the investigation, case agents received information from a confidential source, CS1. CS1, cocksucker 1, it's going to be Anthony Persiano, concerning the illegal activities of Joseph Servideo and other members and associates of Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra, regularly called the Mafia or Mob, which is a secret criminal organization. CS1, cocksucker 1, Anthony Persiano, began providing information based on personal dealings to the FBI in 2015. Once again, no date. Persiano is a made member of the Philadelphia Mafia and is personally familiar with the numerous other members and associates, and has provided detailed information as to the workings of the Philadelphia mob, including the criminal activity of its members. Anthony Persiano has proven to be credible, and the information that Anthony Persiano provided has been independently verified. I love the language here. Independently verified through various means, including but not limited to telephone record data, analysis, database checks, and physical surveillance, information received from other law enforcement agencies, and information received from other confidential sources, and consensually monitored conversations and meetings. And so what they're making an argument, in one statement, they say this guy wasn't believable from day one, but now all of a sudden everything is corroborated. And I don't know how you get to that. Why? Because he says so? And so one of the things that I had an issue with just looking at the very beginning of this was that the special agent that was overseeing all of this, by the way, his name is Agent Hendel, he calls Persiano credible. Meanwhile, he already knew that Persiano was caught in schemes while under his watch, under his fucking supervision and protection, and while he was being paid by the FBI. The other issue with that particular statement is that the verification and point-blank fact that Hendel's supervisory agent, who wasn't even involved with it, said this guy is full of shit, should speak volumes. If you're called full of shit from day one, you're fucking full of shit day 360 fucking 4. And listen, I could go with the counts that he was only charged in 2 counts, mail fraud and wire fraud. His Code Red company, he got in trouble with, but he never got charged with nothing. And it's ridiculous. The mere fact that the FBI, they can corroborate 2 flies fucking in Egypt on a wiretap, and they can't corroborate when the fuck he started working for the FBI is a fucking problem. He defrauded and schemed the entire time while he was under the FBI's watch. He should have been highly scrutinized alone for those actions, and the dozens of other actions, which included a dozen other fraud cases, which some have rightfully sued for in civil court. And some of those people were taken advantage of, specifically someone that I know. This person is disabled. She was on a fixed income. He stole $100,000 from her in his little fraud scheme. And she only found out about it through the media that Anthony Persiano was a rat. She got fully taken advantage of. She contacts the FBI for emergency, for information and help. And what do? They don't return calls. They don't say nothing. They ignore her. The second issue is if the FBI or the case agent in this particular case knowingly still considered Persiano a credible source of information, meanwhile he's breaking the law in other multiple situations, why didn't the FBI stop feeding that pipeline? Doesn't it refer back to the supervisory agent from the onset who refused to believe that Persiano was even being truthful? Doesn't this point to the mere fact that Persiano is dishonest, disgenuine, a fucking coward, and he continued to facilitate his own monetary gains while being protected and rewarded by the FBI for his services? How can you even establish any evidentiary merit of truth based on the onset of lies from day one and continuing through the Joe Servideo case and now the case involving 15 defendants in South Philadelphia? It's up to the government to provide unwavering factual evidentiary documents that prove that their confidential source is telling the most accurate and unabashed truth. This is a case sample of the ends justify the means for the FBI, as it's always been. As long as the targeted defendants they want to lock up are bigger and more, and it gets them more convictions, then they're going to accept and tolerate pieces of goddamn shit like this. It's unfucking real. So I want to go to one of the charges because it's important, and I'll tell you why. The defendant, Anthony Persiano, did knowingly cause to be sent and delivered by the United States Postal Service certain mail matter, namely a check in the amount of $22,124.33 fucking cents from victim company number 2 to Code Red in Bensalem, Pennsylvania, which was deposited by Anthony Persiano into a Code Red Fire Water Restoration LLC bank account at Wells Fargo branch in New Jersey on January 5th of 2016. He's defrauding people in 2016. He was on the fucking FBI's payroll in 2015. So you have an example right here of him breaking the fucking law, lying to the government then. Why are they believing anything else he has to say? At the time of the fraud, Persiano was on the FBI payroll. He was considered an active informant. This is another example of the government's witness who's going to be used in further cases directly and brazenly breaking the law, which they're protecting, they're paying. It's another example of a fraud. It's another example of biting the hand that feeds you. It's purely another example of the integrity and honesty that informants have when they're cooperating with the federal government, which should on its face prove that Anthony Persiano is an unsavory, untruthful piece of shit. If we cannot accept that logic, then how the fuck under any circumstance or any instance can we believe that Anthony Persiano has been honest about a goddamn thing? It just is disgusting. I have a bunch of shit here that I could talk about, but I really want to hit home on a couple of things, and then we'll move on. So under Agent Hindle, who wrote the paperwork, he says that he fully understands how the alleged mafia uses a hierarchical structure. This is very important. Pay attention to this. He understands how the alleged mafia uses a hierarchical structure with their own set of laws. Now, if we are to assume that Agent Hindle knows that information to be correct, then I need to direct you to page 17 of the criminal complaint. And this is a big one. On June 11th of 2016, cocksucker Anthony Persiano had a meeting with Joe Servideo and Individual 1 in Northfield, New Jersey. During this meeting, Servideo informs cocksucker Anthony Persiano that he had been instructed not to conduct criminal activity in the Atlantic City area. Servideo said he knows that they don't want me to do nothing illegal. And he's referring allegedly to the Philadelphia Mafia hierarchy. Servideo then assures Anthony Persiano that he did whatever the fuck he wanted to do. He don't live by no rules. Based on the investigation, including subsequent consensually recorded meetings, messages, phone calls, and interviews of Anthony Persiano, your affiant, which is the agent that oversaw the case, believes that the instructions given to Servideo not to engage in criminal activity with members and associates of the Philadelphia Mafia that were located in the Atlantic City area represented the higher-ranking members' exertion of authority and control over Servideo, including the insurance that a portion of the proceeds from criminal activity are kicked up as tribute to the hierarchy. This meeting was audio recorded by Anthony Persiano. Now, here's the thing. Just the statement of this fucking agent of saying that little snippet of a conversation, and I'll read it again, verbatim, that Servideo tells Anthony Persiano that he was told not to do a fucking thing in Atlantic City. He goes on to say that he knows that the Philadelphia mob doesn't want him there, doesn't want him doing a fucking thing. Then he turns around and he tells Anthony Persiano, but I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want to do. Doesn't that sort of dispel this idea that there's a hierarchy in place? Doesn't this dispel the idea that he was told, stay the fuck out? If you're told to stay the fuck out and you say, well, I'm going to do what you want, then how can you argue in federal court that there's a hierarchy that exerts authority over you? Because in this sample itself, Servideo is saying, go fuck yourself. I do what I want. So obviously there's no exertion of authority or fear. It's bullshit. It's nonsense. And if Agent Hindle understands and is knowledgeable in regards to how the mob works, and if he fully understands that money is kicked up and that the mafia has rules and codes which they live by, then factually, obviously, number 17 on this list is filled with huge fucking problems. It just represents that Servideo is basically saying he was told by individual one that he wasn't supposed to do nothing. Meanwhile, the sentence basically tells us that he tells Persiano he's going to do whatever he wants, which is ignoring an alleged direct order. Therefore, the alleged laws or the suggestiveness of laws or a hierarchy must either not fucking exist or it's not relevant to Servideo and what he wants to do. How can the agent in this case believe or decode what he believes to be instructions based on the words of somebody else when it's not implicit? There's zero proof that these statements were made, just the words of Servideo, which are what I think are meant to impress Anthony Persiano about his willingness to defy the alleged laws because it suits his interests to do whatever the fuck he wants. And it's obviously saying he doesn't fear anyone, doesn't worry about mob retribution. And Anthony Persiano, being an alleged made guy in the mob, would also understand that if these rules existed, he would also be put in direct violation of breaking those rules, making him more culpable for his actions. So if we follow this delusional logic of this agent, either the laws don't truly exist or they feared zero reprise from what the government claims to be the mafia. And if there is a hierarchy, as far as what Agent Hindle wants to say, then both Anthony Persiano and Joe Servideo abandon that structure immediately. If that structure and everything kicks up, then surely they would be risking themselves by not following the laws in the alleged edict of a hierarchical or a boss. And if the mob is so-called fearsome and retributive and all of this nonsense this guy is saying, then why didn't that happen? Why didn't it happen? If anything, it just shows that there's not laws. At least there's not a clear definition of it. So here's another thing. And I'm going to make 2 or 3 more points and we'll move on. October 29th of 2016, cocksucker Anthony Persiano has a meeting with Joe Servideo in Memora, New Jersey. During that meeting, Persiano provided Servideo with $1,600 in American money, which was provided by the FBI as payment for heroin pills and e-cigarettes alleged to contain marijuana that Servideo had provided on October 23rd of 2016. Anthony Persiano and Servideo also discussed Servideo's prior conversations with individual 2 regarding Anthony Persiano said, "What did individual 2 say to you when you told him you're going to be working with us? What did he say?" Servideo says, "He said no problem." Persiano then says to him, "Joe, is it all right with you when I see individual 2 that I bring up the same subject?" Servideo said, "Yeah, but I don't think you have to." There's a problem here with this. I thought there wasn't supposed to be any criminal activity in Atlantic City. I thought Atlantic City was off limits. So here we have an example again of Servideo doing what he wants without any sort of alleged permission. Why is there a need for Servideo and Persiano to even discuss this even further? I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want to do. Why are you even discussing it? First of all, Persiano's baiting him. But if it's accepted, as Servideo claims, then Persiano wouldn't even have a fucking need to broach the matter with individual number 2. Number 38, on January 13th of 2017, at approximately 2:25 p.m., Persiano received an incoming call from Servideo's phone number 3, wherein Persiano has a conversation with Servideo. During the conversation, Servideo informs Anthony Persiano that he was in the area and that he could meet with him. Persiano tells Servideo that he was in Philadelphia to meet with individual number 2, but could meet him later. Servideo says, "I talked to the kid," who's individual 2, before 2. Don't tell him that we talked today. Anthony Persiano says, "Yeah, I know. Listen, what goes on between us stays between us, brother. Don't you even worry." Servideo says, "Yeah, he knows a little bit, what I'm trying to say, because individual 1 will tell him." Servideo doesn't. So what the construct of this part of the conversation is once again, they're talking about individual 2 who has allegedly said, according to Servideo, "Stay the fuck out of Atlantic City." And so here they are talking about saying, you know what? He knows a little bit. Obviously, he doesn't know anything because it's against, according to the FBI, it's against the laws for them to go against what a rule is or what a fucking law is. But here they are talking to each other saying, we do whatever we want. Fuck them. Don't let them know we're talking. Let's just keep it going. Let's just keep making money. So it goes against everything that the FBI is arguing here. Servideo doesn't want, Servideo then says, well, he kind of knows what we're doing. No, he doesn't, because obviously he did. If he did, there would be a much bigger fucking issue. So it goes on further. What Servideo did not want was he did not want Anthony Persiano telling individual 2, who the FBI alleges was Anthony Persiano's capo. He didn't want the capo to know that they were meeting and talking. Why is that? Because they were fucking told not to do it and they did it anyway. So if that captain in this situation, which is also individual number 2, doesn't fucking know what they're doing, how can you find him culpable of what they're doing if he doesn't even fucking know? And that is the basis for what I have a huge fucking problem with. And the other reason why Servideo doesn't want Anthony Persiano to tell anything to individual number 2, who's the alleged captain or an alleged captain in the crime family, is because he doesn't want the information that Servideo told the capo to not coincide with what he said. So in other words, listen, I'm just going to tell him we're talking about the weather. He thinks we're just talking about the weather. Meanwhile, you're talking about narcotics or whatever else the fuck. And it's a wash. It's a wash. 1 minute, it's okay. The next minute, it's not. This provides no proof that individual 2, who was an alleged captain in the Philadelphia Mafia, had any idea what was going on. In fact, I would even go further as to say it proves without a doubt that individual 2 didn't have a fucking clue what was going on. Therefore, any crimes that Persiano and Servideo were engaging in were hidden without the alleged sought permission from a hierarchical figure. And this is clearly Servideo and Persiano doing whatever the fuck they want, feeling justified doing whatever they want, which argues against any sort of laws, argues against any sort of boss or hierarchy type of involvement. It shows that both of them were not under the thumb or the reign of anyone but themselves. And it's continued coaching from the federal agent. And the informant in this case lacks direct lines to demands, rules, bylaws, and a hierarchy. This case, while it's the objective here to show inconsistencies of Persiano, it also speaks to the incorrect assertions that either individual was involved with anything that was organized. In fact, this is disorganized. And so it's absurd. And I could, go on and on and on about this. But I just, first of all, there's been stuff that have been put in indictments about members of the Mafia. Well, it's not a crime to be in the Mafia. Is it a crime to be a member of a Moose Lodge? Is it a crime to be in the Masons? Is it a fucking crime to be a member of the Police Benevolence Association? It's not a crime to join any club. It's not a crime. But the FBI always wants to frame it a certain kind of way. And it's not a fucking crime. Persiano is wishy-washy at best. Servideo and Persiano consistently tried to hide their actions. There was zero factual proof that individual 2 gave any permission for anything, or even had any involvement or had any say in the matter. And it's bullshit, because one indictment transfers to another, unfortunately. And it's just, to me, it's very wishy-washy. And listen, with any indictment, there's a lot of facets to it, right? But there is some stuff that just is reprehensible. So here's what's funny. So, and we're almost to the end of this because I don't want to go on all day about it, but there was a plea application that was entered by Anthony Persiano. So it was USA versus Persiano, United States District Court, District of New Jersey, dated 2/25/19, criminal index number 19145 RBK. So Persiano, who signs the document, claims at the time he signed this, 2/25/19, to be employed as a senior project manager. Of what? Snorting coke, sucking dick, and fucking lying? Unfucking real. So this is dated 2/25/19, like I said. And to my personal knowledge, Persiano was not employed. And at least he's not a senior project manager. To my knowledge, he still owns and operates a restaurant in New Jersey, which is against his plea agreement to pay restitution to those he defrauded. He's continuing to make money from the government as well as hold business ownership, hasn't paid a dime to any of the imposed fines or restitutions of people he defrauded. Meanwhile, he has provided information about 15 other fucking defendants. The FBI has continued to provide a safe haven, a shelter, and money to their most prized possession, a jerk-off. Meanwhile, they totally disregard his fucking criminality and have allowed him to continue to make money on the side, to buy cars, buy presents, with zero fucking oversight. Zero fucking oversight. Here's the restitution order from the courts. The defendant understands that restitution is mandatory and that the court will determine the total amount of restitution to be paid for by the defendant at a restitution hearing at or before the time of sentencing. The parties, however, agree that the defendant will be responsible for restitution related to the criminal conduct and related losses to victims only in count 1 and 2, and the conduct related to the charge schemes, artifices to defraud charged in the information, which includes the insurance fraud related to a staged robbery at a pawn shop in Union, New Jersey, April 2014, and the fraud related to his business dealings with homeowners and other customers who contracted with Home Restoration Business Code Red and Assured during the years of 2014-2015. So meanwhile, this cocksucker is pilfering people from 2016 to 2017. The FBI doesn't apply any restitution to those victims. So if you're telling me that the government says you have to do X, Y, and Z, why is he still making money from a restaurant in New Jersey? Why is the money that they're paying him to squeal on fucking everybody and make up shit not being applied to that restitution? And we see here, not only were there a dozen other or so victims ignored, but Persiano has never, in any of those cases, because of his agreement, he only had to plead to 2 fucking counts when there's probably 2 dozen. He's been afforded the ability to run a restaurant, to take a paycheck, along with being paid as an informant. He has made 0 attempts to amend or pay a single fucking person. While the agreement agreed that Persiano would only have to pay back those he only victimized for a year, the FBI bypassed those he robbed in 2016 and those that were others that were littered through 2014 and 2015. The FBI in this case only focused on 2 counts when there's a dozen others. The victims in this case have been ignored, and they've had to seek the help of civil courts because either the FBI has refused to engage those claiming that they were victimized, or they just don't give a fuck. And the reason's easy to understand. It's very easy to understand. Persiano is still an active informant, and this is an example, a big example of informants' misdeeds being ignored for the sake of not impugning their fucking testimony or their character in an upcoming case. It's a glowing example of the FBI cherry-picking fucking crimes and choosing unsavory pieces of shit who have shown an ultimate willingness to lie, cheat, and steal while being afforded more rights by the FBI than the fucking defendants in the case itself. And there's a lot more I could go into, but I'm not. We have seen this in case after case after case after case. The guy's a junkie. He's a degenerate. He's a scumbag, a cocksucker, and a rat. And yet, without going into details, they want to fraudulently indict 15 fucking guys on the words of this piece of shit. You cannot charge someone with being the head of fucking anything when there's, when they're admitting that they were told to stay out of Atlantic City. Okay, so maybe that might acknowledge there's some sort of figurehead. But they're told to stay out. And the emphasis of the government is they do what they're told, and if they don't, the hierarchical structure will rain down on them like the fucking armpits of Satan's ballsack or whatever the fuck. But if you look at Servideo and Persiano talking, it seems an awful lot to me like they don't live by any rules. They just do whatever the fuck they want. And this isn't an indictment on Servideo. It's an indictment on Persiano. It's an indictment on the FBI. They know so much about the fucking Mafia that for decades they have been lying about people in positions. We talked about it 2 weeks ago, the shit with Galante, and how the FBI and the DEA fraudulently lied and said he was an up-and-comer so they could get more money for the prosecution and more headlines. And so in this particular South Philadelphia case, which everybody knows about, it's been everywhere, which I won't talk about, who do you think the rat is in this case? Persiano again. You know, all I can tell you is this. In any indictment out of 60 pages, 15 of those pages are going to be irrefutable to the point where you have to make really great arguments. But what about tapes? Because tapes are always mentioned in indictments. You know how you get around tapes? It's very simple. You play all of them. Because historically, we have seen tapes be played in court. And I'll give you a good example. The Joey Merlino trial. They wanted to play all the juicy tapes. Joey Merlino allegedly saying it's easy to kill people. But they're not going to play the tapes of Rubio calling Joey Merlino a cocksucker, saying he's going to get him at any sort of turn he can, how he's going to sell a book with George Anastasia, how the aliens are landing and probing him and he likes it. None of those tapes could be played. How is that fucking irrelevant? Because most times in federal cases, I've seen it myself, they will play a wiretap of some guy going, yeah, the money gets kicked up to Jimmy the three-titted clown. or else. But then 2 minutes later, the tape they don't allow will say, I've never heard of Jimmy the Three Tits Clown. Didn't he die like 3 years ago? So that's the whole point. They don't play all the tapes because a judge is allowed to allow certain tapes and not tapes. I'm sorry, but from where I fucking stand, if you're going to say I robbed the bank and you got surveillance footage, don't show the footage of me walking out with the money. Show fucking everything, because maybe somebody was sticking a chrome dildo to my back and I was afraid I was going to get fucking roto-rootered, so I did what they told me to do. I'm not saying everybody's innocent. Far from it. But what I'm telling you is, if you're going to fight a criminal fucking case, when your life is on the fucking line, everything that's collected should be used. What is the fucking harm in doing it? There is no harm. It's harm to the government because what they want you to believe and what they want you to fucking ingest, half the time can be refuted by listening to the whole tape. And I can't say it any better. So, Persiano, you're a piece of shit. You're a jerk-off. You're a cokehead, a drug addict, a junkie, a loser, a nothing. But because he can't do no time, he's just going to tell on everybody. The amount of shame your children must have looking in the mirror that your dad's a fucking nothing and a rat. And I don't give a fuck. This stuff has a tendency to get me in a lot of trouble. I'm not going to lie. But at the end of the day, I don't give a fuck because the guy's a jerk-off. A complete and utter fucking jerk-off. Couldn't even fucking last an hour in the hot box. What kind of gangster are you? Jerk-off fuck. All right, so all that being said, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about 3 of the most powerful mob bosses of all time. Stay tuned on Mob Talk Radio.